Okay, so this is who I am, and my email address is there. As I've said, I'm a textile designer. I'm a textile designer by training. My undergraduate degree is from Philadelphia Textile, which is now part of Thomas Jefferson. So we were founded as a textile school in 1884. We are the oldest textile school in the United States. And we were founded to create more competition in textiles globally because England and France were so much more advanced than the US was at that time. And so we were founded to create some competition. And my undergraduate degree is in textile design. I worked about 20 years full-time in the textile industry, always in home, mostly in home furnishings, always in interiors, running design and product development teams. I worked for a very large textile manufacturer. We did not grow cotton. We did not extrude polyester, but we spun our own yarns. We wove, knitted, printed, dyed and finished, cut and sewed our textiles into products. So I was spoiled. We did all of it. But I also was spoiled in my education because our institution also does very much of it as well. And then I had a very strong desire to teach. So those of you in academia perhaps understand this. And I went back to school for my fine arts degree, my Master of Fine Arts in Fibers, and that led directly into teaching. I have been at Thomas Jefferson University, formerly Philadelphia University, for about 15 years. I'd love to show you a little bit of our campus first, and it also helps to explain how we work and how we think. We are collaborative by nature. We work together very naturally. We are not siloed. We are not separated by programs or by departments. We believe that innovation and excitement happens when we are together. And most of these images, if not all of them, most of these images were taken prior to our current pandemic. And so you do see people working closely together. Obviously, in our current situation, we are socially distant. We wear masks. So these are earlier images. And you can see some of our spaces, lots of colorful yarn. I'll show you a little bit more of that as we go. I'm also the director. So in addition, I direct the textile design programs, the Bachelor of Science and Master of Science. I'm also the director of the Fashion and Textiles Futures Center, which is an umbrella organization on campus that brings together our fashion and textile disciplines. In textiles, we teach textile design, textile product science, which is an undergraduate technical degree, textile engineering and textile technology at the master's level, and we also offer PhDs in textiles. In fashion, we have fashion design and fashion merchandising and management at the undergraduate level. We have fashion design management, which is a master's level program with Milan Polytechnic. We have global fashion enterprise, which is the supply chain, the business supply chain of fashion, also at the master's level. So that's those are the different degrees that fall into the Futures Center. On this slide, you can see the International Textile Alliance Textile Design Studio. This is our primary collaborative studio space. I'm actually taking this photo from standing inside my office. My office is a glass box inside the studio, and I'm shooting out through the studio. I am hopeful that the translations are accurate. As I shared, I did these through Google Translate today and yesterday, and if anything is terribly wrong, my apologies. I had two wonderful.
So far, so good. So far, if it's good, Excellent. You shouldn't say the source. It reads perfectly.
Thank you for that. I had two native Spanish speakers who both graduated from our program in May, both from Puerto Rico. And had I worked a little further in advance, I would have shared this with them to make sure that everything was good. But and you can see our students working together. And again, the images that I'm sharing are primarily student work because I do think that's the best way to understand the opportunities that we provide. We'll get into more of our projects once I finish this little bit of a tour through our spaces. We have a Center for Excellence in Digital Printing. On campus, we can digitally print on anything, not just any textile, because of course that's very possible for us. Different digital printers print on different substrates. So reactive printers, dye sublimation printers, that sort of thing, depends on the fiber content of the textile base. But we can also digitally print on any other surface. We can print on 3-dimensional objects. We can print very large 4 foot by 8 foot, so like 1.5 meters by maybe 2.5 meter flat pieces. We can print on glass, on wood, on iPhone cases, you name it. We're known for our excellence in that area. We do also, you can see on the slide, the image on the upper left, 2 students are screen printing. We teach everything first with analog methods. So we teach hand skills, drawing and painting before we do print design, screen printing before we do digital printing. We work our way up through the technology into industry standard technology. It's true whether we are knitting or weaving or printing. Our Center for Excellence in Knitwear Design, you can see in terms of the equipment in the foreground is a Stoll knitting machine, which is about a year old. Behind it in the background is a piece of Shima equipment. We also have a Santoni circular knitter. You're seeing just a very edge of a piece of hand equipment, but we also have V-beds and Dubied V-beds, Dubied and Stoll V-beds, and also Passap hand flats. And on the upper left of the screen is a space that we use as a training center. We do a fair amount of industry-specific training. So if a company comes to us and they have a specific need, we see if we can help them with training seminars. That could be an intensive weekend, it could be week-long, it could be every Friday for 1 month, whatever works for them. And then also in woven design. We start on hand looms, floor looms. If there are any weavers on the call today, we start with 8 harnesses, 8 shafts, and our hand equipment goes up through 24 shafts. Our oldest looms are 24 harness dobbies that are original to the founding of the university in 1884. We have done custom retrofits with computer interfaces for them, so that's much faster pattern change. We also have a 16 harness industrial Dornier loom, Dornier dobby, and we have 3 jacquard looms, so image-based weaving is possible. And you can see on the right side of the screen, 2 of the older industrial jacquards. These each have cotton warp, so the yarn that is set onto the loom is cotton. It's at 90 ends per inch. And on the left is our newest jacquard loom that's about 3 years old, and it's tied at 173 ends per inch of 70 denier polyester. So we can use it as a dye sublimation print base as well. This is how we think. This is trying to show you how we think, how our students are inspired and where their ideas come from. And so our students are very, they are artists, but they are also very strongly technically skilled. Our programs and our university, because we are design as opposed to fine art, and we're Master of Science, Bachelor of Science, as opposed to Master of Fine Arts, Bachelor of Fine Arts, we live in that intersection between art and aesthetics and technology and technical knowledge. Our students, when they're thinking through an idea, they tend to work with their hands. And this is work by one of our students, Sinead Cahill. She's in our master's program currently. And she was doing work around this idea. It's a rather complicated concept, but around this idea of coins and money as kind of a marker, as a cultural marker. So this was some of her ideation, her sketchbook work, how she thought through her topic. And this is the work by another one of our students, Kara Beckner, in our master's program. Kara started with collage, which is in the center, and then she did these very simplistic weavings on the right and the left of the slide. These were her first weavings done when we went remote in March, and she quarantined to her family's home in South Carolina. So she was perhaps 8 hours away in a beach house, which doesn't sound like a terrible place to spend quarantine. But she had limited resources, limited materiality, and she actually has some seagrass woven into these samples. And she did some dyeing with natural materials, which we'll talk more about in a moment. And one more example of how our students think. This is the work of Heather Kelly. I mentioned earlier that we are collaborative by nature. I have a very dear colleague in architecture, and he and I and our students collaborate every year or 2 years on a project. And Heather is one of our students in the Textile Master's program, and her partner was an architecture student. They were creating some possible installations for exterior spaces on campus. And Heather was, and again, this is work that was done right after we went remote in March. So Heather started with some drawing and some painting in her sketchbook, and then she started building with cardboard, because cardboard was what she had. And it was a way to explore formal qualities and three-dimensional qualities in a rather simplistic and fast way. So this is how our students start to think through opportunities. Sometimes the opportunities are posed to them, but more often than not, they are identifying the opportunities on their own and then finding ways to solve them. When we think about some of the research work that we are doing on campus, my colleague, Professor Megan Kelly, is really on starting a body of research on exploration of knitted structures. So this is work that's being done on the stole equipment that is shown here on the slide on the right-hand side. And this is a rather simple knitted structure. It involves 2 stitches, sort of knit stitches and purl stitches, like the front and the back of the fabric. And the geometry of the patterning combined with the fiber and the yarn size is creating the three-dimensional qualities of the textile and also the deformation of the textile. So they're warping into these different shapes because of this honestly fairly simplistic geometry. It is the start of some predictive modeling that Professor Kelly will be doing with another one of our colleagues, Professor Flax. And they did this in conjunction with one of our master's students in textile engineering, Bryce Peckman. So this is very current work, and we're just embarking on this. staying in the knitted realm, so at our master's level in textile design, our students select knit design, woven design, or print design to develop a level of mastery and to really explore specific ideas of interest. It's not to the exclusion of the other fields, but it is to really focus their work and their energy. And we have found a number of students very interested in the folding capabilities of knitted structure. On the left-hand side, you see two images of the same or of similar textiles created by one of our current textile design master's students, Isabel Ramos. Isabel is very interested in how structure combined with fiber can create these textiles that more or less fold onto themselves. Drew McKevitt is one of our recent alums from the master's program, and she studied origami, so the Japanese art of paper folding, and used that as a starting point for these textiles that fold. Her focus was, so the ivory colored sample, the third from the left, her focus was on textiles for as garment, as apparel. The sample on the far right of the slide is some work she's doing currently. She's collaborating with a designer who I believe is in the Netherlands, and they are exploring different aspects of development around the topic of footwear. And we've had a number of students work on footwear, both in terms of knitted structure and in terms of woven structure. In terms of woven structure, one of our most brilliant alums, Ji Young Park, is a wonderful recent alum who is now back home in Korea. And one of the qualities that we see in many of our students, and Ji illustrated it beautifully, is this wonderful curiosity, this sense of what will happen if I combine these different fibers, if I combine these different finishes, if I combine these different methods of making, what are the possibilities? And this is work from Ji's thesis collection. The sample on the upper left is all of these samples are jacquard woven. So they're woven on our jacquard looms. And Ji worked with fiber and finish to create this range of qualities of textiles. The fabric on the upper left is one of the fabrics that we showcased at ITMA. Some of you in the textile realm may know the ITMA trade show. We were in Barcelona last summer, well, a year ago, so in 2019, and we had our university had a booth, and this was one of the fabrics that we showcased there, and it is the one that drew people into the booth, that they came in and said, how is this done? What did you do? And we're an academic institution. We don't have secrets. We're very happy to share what we do and how it was done. And still somehow they didn't believe us. But it's heat and slit, kind of a metallic slit film yarn and jacquard woven, and just a really beautiful piece. In the center, it's a jacquard that's woven with monofilament or fishing line, very fine fishing line, and elastomeric or spandex, along with some metallic, again, a metallic slit film, creating this kind of wonderful movement. And you see that in the center and also on the lower left. The sample on the right is a combination of woven structure on the jacquard loom, metallic yarn, elastomeric, and digital printing. It was dyed, sub-printed, and it created this almost cracked surface effect to it. It's actually a fabric that was gifted to a fairly famous Italian fashion house when they visited campus, the principal of the fashion house. Kristen Tynan is one of our current thesis students in the Textile Design Masters, and in her thesis, she is exploring textiles as tactile sensory tools. So can textiles help people who suffer from neurosensitivity? So textiles to either calm down a space, activate a space, or help a person to focus. I think it's really interesting in these images that in all cases, the hand is also shown. It speaks to the tactile quality of the work that Kristen is doing. And on the left, you catch a glimpse of one of our looms from 1884. And what Kristen is doing is she is weaving into it knitted tubes. She wove monofilament knitted, she knitted monofilament tubes and then wove them into a deflected thread structure. The piece in the center is a combination of weaving and silicone. And then the piece on the right involves clay balls that she created and then threaded into this rather tactile surface. And she's working with colleagues because Thomas Jefferson University was founded as a medical school. So what we are now is a combination of a medical school and a textile school. That's the combination that we have. So it's creating new opportunities for us. And Kristen is working with colleagues of ours in the occupational therapy program. My colleague, Becky Flax, is working with another colleague in biology, Ann Bauer, on a research, and this is a multi-year research project, looking at using invasive plants as natural dye resources. They looked at three invasive plants that grow in our area. Again, this is Eastern Pennsylvania, so we are in the northeastern part of the US, and have explored these different plants from a biocidal standpoint, from a natural dye standpoint. They've explored them on different fibers, on wool and on cotton and on linen. They've explored them with different mordants to set the dye, and it's an ongoing project. So it's looking at a plant or at multiple plants that are truly invasive in nature and seeing what are the possibilities that surround this. We see more and more interest in what can we do with the natural materials, and it's part of why this topic, this matters of materiality, sort of resonated with me, and I'm hoping it resonates with you tonight, because we know that in this day and age, it's not enough to make more beautiful product. The world probably doesn't need more beautiful product. And what we see our students focusing on, I mean, certainly sustainability, but that's such a broad term and can mean so many things to so many people. So sustainability through material choice. So this is the work of Kelly Siseski, again, a current master's student in our program. And she's been exploring materiality with natural materials that are often used, that often are waste materials. So perhaps the peel off a banana, or the rind off an orange, or the skin off some kind of a squash that you would peel. So she's looking at these materials and thinking about sustainability and new materiality, not so much from a standpoint of, can this product last forever? And so I'm going to invest more in a better product and buy less. She's looking at it more from a more ephemeral, more temporal perspective. What if we can find ways to incorporate materials that will very naturally degrade fairly quickly over time? And so we're making less impact on the earth because we're using waste materials to create the textiles, and knowing that they will do no harm in both the production of the textiles and also when they are disposed of. So that's sort of the samples on the left. On the right, and I'm hoping this translates, or I'm hoping that it's understandable. The sample on the top center on the right is dryer lint. So it's when one washes and dries one's clothes, it's what's left behind. It's the fiber that comes off. And so that's what this is, again, is looking at what we would really conceive as a waste product and what could be done with it. The other samples are all natural materials from her yard, whether they were dried grasses or stems from plants, some feathers, again, things all harvested or gathered very naturally. So it's one approach that our students are taking to the thought of sustainability and materiality. One other that I want to comment on is the idea of fiber shed. So there's and I think it is a global movement, the fiber shed movement, where one is sourcing within a smaller footprint. So rather than us shipping things back and forth across the globe from a carbon footprint standpoint, what can we make locally, regionally? If anything, the global pandemic has, certainly in the US, made us rethink our supply chain, and companies that have the ability to pivot, the ability to do more in sort of a smaller, more regional area have been really succeeding tremendously well. We've seen more partnerships, more linkages caused by companies reaching out to one another and finding ways to work together that perhaps would not have happened had it not been for this terrible pandemic. I do think there are some bright spots, and I think there are some bright spots to how we all think about our work moving forward because of it. Staying in this idea of materials, Sinead is looking at recycling or repurposing. One says that the most sustainable garment is the one that's already in our closet. I had a really interesting conversation with my graduate students this past week, and we were talking about sustainability and the idea of better garments, fewer garments, and the idea of being able to pass them down to the next generation. And this highlights how much I am such a different generation than my students. One of my students said she was wearing a denim jacket, and she said, I purchased this jacket in 2012, and I'm being very careful with it. I'm washing it very gently because I would like to pass this on to my future children. And of course, I'm smiling because I'm thinking 2012 was just right around the corner. But to her, in her lifespan, 2012 is, probably, like a third of her life. So, but it's an interesting conversation. We realize when we have this conversation about doing more with less and about the choice of perhaps investing in better but fewer pieces, we realize it's the conversation of a wealthy society. And we are conscious of that because we are conscious that we have choices. So Sinead is working with this idea of choice by looking at recycling and repurposing materials. And this is work she's doing currently. I took these images yesterday in Graduate Studio. She's working primarily with materials that she is finding on her job. And I think she works in a restaurant, kitchen, something like that. And so the aluminum foil on the left comes from packaging materials. In the center, you see this pile created by plastic. So this is slit plastic. our reality is that plastic is going to be in our, and plastic in a, like, I'm using that term as a big broad term as opposed to thinking about the actual physical different types of plastics. But we know that it's going to be part of our lives for the foreseeable future. Certainly it will always be part of my life. I mean, it's not going to go away in the next X years that I have of living, despite the detriments that we know plastics cause environmentally. So are there ways we can work with plastic besides, there's some interesting work happening with plastic that's being regenerated or reused, kind of chopped up and used into new products. And I think that's all fantastic. Like, we're all looking at these same problems and saying, what can we do? What can we bring to bear? And then the same thing is true here of the sample on the right. It is primarily using repurposed materials. There's some heavy duty strapping material in it, the kind of straps that would be put around a carton before it is shipped, in addition to some plastic and some aluminum. We are known for our work with materials, and again, often in very low-tech ways. We do a competition, a project every 2 years with Glen Raven. Glen Raven is one of the largest textile manufacturers in the US. They do have a global presence, but they're headquartered in the US. And one of their products is a product branded as Sunbrella. Sunbrella are fabrics for outdoor use. It started out as fabrics for boats, for the boating trade, and then moved into outdoor awnings and outdoor furnishings. And now Sunbrella fabrics are found both in homes, they're found in many, many places. People found, because they are bleach cleanable and stain resistant, fade resistant, people have found that they work very well in homes with pets and children, or even people who like a glass of red wine on a white couch. So Glen Raven came to us. We do many projects with industry partners. Industry partners come to us with real world projects. What Glen Raven does is they give us a palette of their yarn and tell us that our students can do absolutely anything with it. They're just looking for innovation. They're looking for new ideas. Our students are fortunate because they don't have to worry about how Glen Raven would ever mechanize or industrialize the processes that they choose to use. Their goal is, their job as students is, what could you do with it? So these are 2 images from a winning collection. It is a competition, and Samantha Fletcher, who's one of our alums of the master's program, won the competition. Samantha took advantage of every opportunity while she was in our program. She did collaborative courses. She spent a month in China. She was selected for an internship program. She did a collaborative course with Aalto University in Finland. She traveled with me to West Africa. She partnered with, we did a collaboration with a university here at Watt in Galashiel, Scotland, and she participated in that. So one of those students who took advantage of every opportunity that came her way. And here you can see some of her creativity. She used the Sunbrella yarns, and these were polyester polyvinyl chloride primarily, also some acrylic in the sample on the left, and worked with them in ways that Glen Raven was not. She did some knitting and some crocheting and some combining things and working. So.
No. Esta es una charla, está explicando una cosa.
So a young someone there? Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. And Sam's first position out of the program was with Adidas, based in Germany. Is there a question?
No, I think someone has the mic. Could you please switch off your microphones? No question. Go on, Marcia.
Okay, thank you. So her first position was with Adidas in Germany, and now she's actually back in the States running a design team in the flooring industry. So carpeting. I want to share with you some other programs, some other projects we've done. I don't have images, but I want to just share some of the things we've done. So what I've said is we are collaborative by nature, which is true. And when companies bring us projects, we look at the project and the scope of the project and determine amongst the faculty who is best to be at that table for that project. So we have done, over the last 3 years, we've done numerous projects with NASA, our National Air and Space Administration, to develop lighter weight composites to be used in their engines, in space engines. And anything I'm talking about, we have not signed non-disclosure. So I'm not breaking any sorts of confidentiality agreements, nor would I. So for the NASA projects, my colleague, who is a textile engineer, and I brought 1 or 2 other faculty members and a couple of students together to work on these projects. They involved carbon nanofiber. So it was an interesting approach, and very interesting. The simple differences from one summer to the next. Like the first summer, we could cut the fiber with normal scissors. The second summer, we could not. And even that was information that they found incredibly helpful. So we worked with Oak Ridge National Laboratories, a research lab in the US, on a synthetic seaweed project. They had a special fiber that they brought to us. And the purpose of the project was to harvest heavy metals from the sea. And so they brought us this special fiber already produced into yarn. And we tried it multiple ways. So my colleague, who was brilliant at braiding, worked with our braiding equipment. My colleague, who was brilliant at knitting, worked with the knitting equipment. I worked on the woven aspect of it. We created many samples, and they ended up selecting a woven sample that was multi-layer and had lino, which is where yarns are twisted around each other for stability, had lino woven into it. They did some work with our samples and determined that this was going to be most beneficial for their needs. And at that point, we turned it over to an industry partner. And they've taken it and run with it, which is perfectly fine. So that was a very different, very interesting project, and the kind of project that, again, it brought engineers and designers together because we have different skills and different knowledge base. We certainly have worked with ligaments. I did a project in collaboration with Princeton University researchers on ligaments. We are not at our university, we are not a clean room. So we are not creating textiles that are implantable directly. We are creating prototypes. So that was just another example of some of what we've done. We look at every project and say, who is best suited for this project? I recently had, yesterday, I had one come across my desk for a company, and they need training in specific textile testing capabilities. I have a colleague who is brilliant in that, who runs our materials characterization lab. And so I handed that project off to her. We don't really stand on ceremony. We're a small enough group, and we know each other's skills well enough that we at least can make introductions and say, here's the possibility. We certainly also have done numerous collaborations with companies, global companies, where we've signed non-disclosures, and so I won't be talking about them. And I think that's where I left it. So thank you very much. Muchas gracias. I very much appreciate you listening to me today.